All right, let's dive into some of the most exciting sci-fi and fantasy books hitting the shelves this January. Perfect timing if you're like me and always want to be ahead of the game when it comes to new releases. We're working with an article here called 13 New Fantasy and Science Fiction Books to Read in January 2025.
Yeah, and it looks like we've got a real mix this month. I mean, there really is something for everyone, from literary sci-fi all the way to martial arts fantasy, even vampire intrigue, a bit of horror.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how these genres keep blurring those lines, creating something totally unique for readers to, sink their teeth into.
Exactly.
Okay, so this first one, Breath of the Dragon, immediately caught my eye. It's co-written by Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, and Fonda Lee, the author of the Green Bone Saga. Talk about a dream team, right?
Seriously, what a combination. I think what really stands out to me is how they take this martial arts fantasy but blend it with that YA energy,
Yeah.
that coming of age, finding your power kind of story.
Totally. And it's all about this tournament, the Guardian Tournament, where these warriors have to protect this mystical scroll. Our main character, though, June, he's kind of the underdog. He doesn't have that magical breath mark that everyone else has, so he has to rely on his own strength and determination.
I love that underdog story, especially set against all those ancient traditions and magic. It's a classic for a reason, and then you add the connection to Bruce Lee's legacy on top of that.
It's going to be fascinating to see how they weave that in. All right, so from a martial arts tournament, we're going to the founding of an empire. Mother of Rome by Lauren J.A. Bear is a fresh take on that whole Romulus and Remus story. The twins raised by a she-wolf who founded Rome.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But instead of the twins, this book is all about their mother, Rhea Silvia. Usually she's just like a side note in the whole myth, but here we get to see everything from her perspective.
Seeing how those political machinations play out, experiencing that fierce motherly love that drives her should be interesting.
Yeah, I always love when authors take something familiar and flip it, give a voice to someone we don't often hear from. Speaking of voices we don't often hear from, let's talk about robots. The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells is about this self-aware security unit who hacks its own system, just so it can chill out and binge-watch space operas.
Oh, I love Murderbot. It's that dry humor mixed with the action that makes it so relatable. Just wants to be left alone, but keeps getting pulled into all these crazy situations. And of course, it ends up saving the day, even though it grumbles the whole time.
And the best part is, there's a TV adaptation coming out on Apple TV Plus Wise. Alexander Skarsgård is playing Murderbot.
Wow, that's interesting casting. I mean, Skarsgård is a fantastic actor, don't get me wrong, but he usually plays these, intense, brooding characters. So I'm curious to see how that translates to Murderbot's more sarcastic, kind of world-weary personality.
Yeah, that's a good point. It'll be interesting to see how they capture that unique voice on screen. They're also releasing these really cool paperback compilations of the series this month. Perfect timing. Okay, let's get a bit more meta now with Death of the Author by Naledi Okorafor. Okorafor is known for her mind-bending stories, and this one sounds like it really plays with the boundaries of fiction and reality.
Yeah, Okorafor is great at blending genres, always pushing the boundaries of speculative fiction. In Death of the Author, she's looking at the relationship between a writer and their creation, but she uses this experimental structure, weaving together all these different narrative threads. It's really a book that makes you think about the power of stories.
I like that. So we have our main character, Zalu, who's this black writer whose novel keeps getting rejected. So frustrated, she decides to write something completely different, a wild sci-fi book called Rusted Robots. And things start to get weird. We actually get to read excerpts from Rusted Robots within the larger story, along with interviews about Zalu and her work. It's like a story within a story.
It's cool how those different narratives all come together. Like we're getting multiple perspectives on the same event, blurring those lines between what's real and what's fiction. Definitely a unique approach. So, are you ready to get into some vampire fantasy now?
Oh, absolutely. Lightfall by Ed Crocker is set in this place called First Light, the Last Vampire City. And it's all about social hierarchy and who gets access to blood, the very lifeblood of their society.
Yeah, it really delves into those power dynamics and the moral questions that come up in a society built on a need for blood. It doesn't shy away from the darker side of vampire lore.
No, it doesn't. So we follow Sam, a palace maid who finds a clue about the city ruler's murder. And she uses this knowledge to try and climb that social ladder, right? But she quickly finds herself in the middle of all these secrets and lies. Werewolves, assassins, a powerful countess. It's all there.
Wow, so it sounds like we have the classic ambition and intrigue, but with that vampire twist. What stands out to you the most in that description?
Honestly, the werewolves. I'm always a sucker for a good werewolf story. And this one seems like it's going to be more than just your typical vampire romance. There's a real sense of danger and conspiracy here, and I want to see how far Sam is willing to go. All right, let's switch gears for a second and talk about something a little spooky. What do you think about occult horror?
Oh, I'm always up for a good scare, especially when it's done well.
Exactly. And Grady Hendrix definitely knows how to deliver the chills. His new book, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, is set in the 1970s at this place called the Wellwood Home. It's a home for unwed mothers to have their babies in secret and then, basically forget it ever happened.
Right.
Our main character, Fern, is a pregnant teenager who befriends some of the other girls and discovers a book on witchcraft.
Ooh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Hendrix is really good at getting under your skin, And this one seems to play on those anxieties around secrecy, control, those themes of vulnerability that young women face. It's not just about the scares. There's that social commentary woven throughout.
Which is what makes his work so effective, right? It's more than just jump scares. There's a real depth to it. Okay, so from horror, we're going to jump to a completely different world now. LitRPG. David Dalglish is coming out with Level Unknown this month, and it's actually his first time writing in this genre.
Oh, wow. I'm really interested to see what he does with it. It's cool to see authors like Dalglish, who are known for more traditional fantasy, experiment with LitRPG. It really shows you how popular and how the genre is evolving.
Yeah, and for those who might not be familiar with LitRPG, it basically takes those video game mechanics and puts them in a fantasy setting. Think leveling up, gaining skills. That's strategic combat. So in Level Unknown, our main character, Nick, is pulled into this deadly fantasy world every time he falls asleep. To survive, he has to fight these increasingly powerful creatures and, level up his abilities.
I think what draws people to LitRPG is that sense of mastery and progression. Like you're getting to experience that same feeling of accomplishment and growth you get from playing a video game, but with actual stakes, real consequences. And speaking of fantasies, have you ever wished you could just trade in your whole life for something totally different?
Oh, constantly. Especially on Mondays. But seriously, that's the premise of the Rainfall Market. It's a cozy fantasy by Yu Young Wang, and it has this really magical, whimsical feel to it. Kind of like Spirited Away. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah. I love Studio Ghibli, and I can totally see the connection. Both of them have that sense of wonder and possibility that magic is hidden in the everyday world, just waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. So the Rainfall Market follows Saren, this lonely teenager who gets a ticket to this magical market. It takes place in an abandoned house, and the market offers you any life you want. But there's a catch. You have to trade in your old life, and you only have a week to decide before you disappear into the market forever.
Oh, wow. So it's like a high-stakes personality quiz, but instead of telling you what kind of bread you are, it's your entire life. It makes you think about what's really important to you, what you'd be willing to let go of, what you're truly searching for.
And to help with that decision, Saren has a magical cat companion to guide her. Who doesn't love a magical cat sidekick?
All right, so we've talked about books that will make you think, books that will scare you, and books that will transport you to these amazing worlds. Now let's talk about a series that's going to get your heart racing. The Empyrean, specifically the third book, Onyx Storm, is coming out this month.
I know so many readers are anxiously awaiting this one. It has all the elements that made the first two books so popular. Dragonriding, action, bit of romance, and all that courtly intrigue.
The first book, Fourth Wing, was a huge hit, I think, because people were craving that Hunger Games intensity, but with dragons. And in Onyx Storm, the stakes are even higher. As Violet, our dragon-riding protagonist, ventures beyond the school to protect her nation from this threat. It's not just about surviving the competition anymore. Violet's dealing with leadership, responsibility, the weight of her nation's fate is on her shoulders, and then you have those internal conflicts, the betrayals that could unravel everything.
Which is what makes this series so captivating. It's not just action, it's about those characters and their relationships. You get invested in their journeys. And speaking of journeys, we have A Crown So Silver, the second book in Lyra Selene's Fair Folk series. It's YA fantasy, but with this really dark, captivating quality.
Yeah. I'm always drawn to those stories that explore the darker side of fairy tales, and this series doesn't hold back. It's got all the fey intrigue, the dangerous magic, and those morally gray characters. It really makes you question what you thought you knew about good and evil.
Yeah, for sure. So in the first book, we met Fia, a changeling who went into the Fey realm to rescue her sister. A Crown So Silver picks up with Fia dealing with the consequences of her actions. Her magic is stronger, but she's also driven by this desire for revenge against her sister, who did something truly awful.
It's that classic revenge story, but set in a world of fey politics and magic. It makes you think about the cost of vengeance, how far you would go, and if redemption is even possible after doing something unforgivable.
Yeah, it's a heavy one. And then there's this Tournament of Kings hosted by this trickster Smith King that's sure to test Fia's alliances and her resolve. I can't wait to see how that unfolds. Okay, let's shift gears a little and talk about some debut novels that have really caught our attention. I'm always excited to see new voices in sci-fi and fantasy, and these two sound super promising. First up, we have Motheater by Linda H. Kodega.
I love that Codeda's bringing their experience covering tabletop gaming and books to this debut novel. They have this really unique understanding of how stories work, how to build worlds and characters.
Absolutely. Motheater is set in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia, which immediately gives it this atmospheric kind of mystical feel. It's about the last witch in the region who has to choose a side in this clash between industry and nature. Our main character is Benithia, or Benny as she prefers, and she's investigating these mysterious deaths in a mine. And then she encounters this woman who claims to be the witch Motheater. It sounds like folklore, mystery, maybe even a little horror all mixed together.
I love how Kodega is using the setting of Appalachia to build that sense of place, the history and magic all intertwined. It sounds like a story about belief and the consequences of our choices, both personal and societal.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by that. Another debut that caught my eye is The Outcast Mage by Annabelle Campbell. It's the first book in the Shattered Lands series, and it's set in Amoria, a city ruled by magic. Think mages in power, magical trials, and if you can't control your magic, you're banished.
Oh, that classic trope of a society divided by magic. But it seems like Campbell's adding a new spin to it.
Exactly. Our main character is Nilo, who's this struggling mage about to be banished. But she's saved by Helios Akana, Amoria's most powerful mage. And that one act of kindness throws her into this dangerous world of politics. There's this constant struggle for power in Amoria, and Nilo's right in the middle of it.
It'll be interesting to see how Campbell handles the magic system in this world. It's so crucial to fantasy, it can really make or break a story. It sounds like magic is both the source of power and conflict here, so seeing how Nyla navigates that to prevent a civil war should be fascinating.
And you know me, I'm always up for a good magical showdown. Speaking of power, let's wrap things up with something special for the collectors out there. The Folio Society is releasing a limited edition of Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin.
Oh, wow. The Folio Society is known for those gorgeous, high-quality editions of classic books. They're practically works of art themselves. And Fire and Blood, which tells the history of the Targaryen dynasty, is perfect for this kind of treatment.
I agree, it's not a new story, but it's this beautifully crafted edition of Martin's Targaryen history. New illustrations, incredible printing, and a really elegant slipcase. It's the kind of book you display on your shelf and just treasure.
It's a reminder that books are more than just words. They're objects of beauty. They connect us to the past and inspire us to imagine the future. What do you think is the draw for someone to pick up this particular edition?
I think for a lot of collectors, it's about having something tangible, something beautiful to represent their love for a specific story or world. Like owning a piece of that world, a connection to the author's imagination. And Fire and Blood is so rich with details, the family trees, the backstories. It just lends itself perfectly to this kind of collector's edition.
It makes you wonder what future generations will collect. What books and stories will stand the test of time to become those treasured artifacts.
That's a great question. Maybe one day it'll be one of the books we're talking about today. Who knows? But what we do know is that there are tons of amazing stories waiting to be discovered this January. From epic fantasies and cozy adventures to thought-provoking sci-fi and chilling horror, there really is something for every reader.
What's exciting to me is how these books, even though they span all these different genres, are all connected by that human experience. They explore our hopes and fears, our dreams, our struggles in ways that are both entertaining and insightful. Whether you want an escape, a challenge, or a new perspective, these books open those doors to worlds familiar and unknown.
It's the magic of reading, isn't it? We step outside ourselves, experience different lives and possibilities, and connect with something bigger than ourselves.
So as you start your reading adventures this year, be open to the unexpected. Let yourself be surprised, challenged, and transformed by the power of storytelling.
Well said. Happy reading, everyone. And until next time, keep those imaginations soaring.